of my favorite genres, like literally of all time, is the post-apocalyptic or dystopian future novel. It's just a whole lot of fun reading about a book where, most of humanity's wiped out, everything's gone to shit. It's just a real, real bad time. For the people in the book, for the ones reading it, it's wonderful. I just love every second of it. But then again, maybe I'm weird. Maybe that's just me. I will say real fast before I get into the actual list that I do have one honorable mention, and that honorable mention is Dr. Blood Money by Philip K. Dick. That did make it onto another one of my lists, but I have to bring it up because I just love that book so much. I feel like it is so underrated, and I say that every time I talk about it, but you hear all these other books by Phil being brought up all the time, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and all of the other popular ones. But I never, ever, ever hear anybody talk about Dr. Blood Money. And I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. I think that is definitely one of my favorites of his books, maybe one of his better ones. There is even a couple chapters where I would say it has some of the best writing, actual, legitimate writing that he's ever done. And I just don't hear enough people talk about Dr. Blood Money. So honorable mention to that. And it actually legitimately fits on this list. It is actually a dystopian post-apocalyptic. So there's that. Anyway, now moving right on into the actual list proper. And it is going to start with number 10. And that is The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi. Is that? Bacigalupi, sorry. It is a post-apocalyptic novel about the world, say if global warming just completely runs rampant and ruins the planet. And then this takes place in Asia. So there are these people in Japan that are genetically engineered. They are called new people. And they're just, basically engineered to be slaves or servants, servant class of genetically altered people. And then this girl is taken down to Thailand with her owner. And then he goes back to Japan and he just abandons her in Thailand. Now this new girl, she is a new girl. They're called new people or wind-up girls. And she is now this wind-up girl in Thailand, and she has to attempt to figure out how to survive. And not only are these genetically engineered people kind of, a lower class than obviously normal people, but they are even more oppressed and looked down upon in Thailand. So she's really screwed. She's in a real bad situation. It's just dreadfully bleak. And the whole thing, there's not much of a positive outlook on the future or people or humanity or anything. It is pretty rough all the way right up to the end. It's just like I said, if you want something just dreadfully bleak from the start to the finish, and you're really following this poor little genetically engineered girl as she tries to survive in this fucked up future, in this fucked up country, get yourself some Wind-Up Girl. It's quite good. It really was. It's the only thing I've ever read by Paolo. I kind of want to get into a little bit more of it, him, you know what I mean? But this one was a winner. I'd say this was quite good. I really genuinely enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, I want to say it won the Hugo Award for Best Novel the year that he released it, which is not entirely surprising when you get down into the quality of that book. Next up with number 9, we are going to go into Metro 2033. This is not the first list that I have slipped Metro 2033 into. And you know what? Who knows? It might not be the last. But I really genuinely loved this book. This is a book by Dmitry Glukovsky. He is a Russian author. This was originally written in Russian and had to be translated into English. It is basically at post-World War III. The bombs have gone off. The world has been completely devastated by nuclear apocalypse and war. And the surface of the planet is completely irradiated and nobody can survive there. But the Russians survive by going down into the metro. And now they live underground in these metro stations. And the stations are like the cities. And then the metro tracks between the stations are how you get back and forth. But it is dark. It is creepy. There are strange creatures that live in those tunnels in the dark. And it is very dangerous traveling from one to the next. And then each little metro kind of has its own little pocket of society, and it's kind of like its own little government and its way of being governed. One is like the Nazi station, one is the communist station, one is the station for more like the philosophers of the metro station per se. Just fascinating. I loved it. Everything about it. Great book, great read. It's actually a trilogy of books. All three of them are really good. I have heard people say that they are difficult to read and they're dry, and I've heard people blame the translation of it, the fact that it's translated from Russian. I don't know. I didn't have problems with it. I didn't struggle at all. I thought it was genuinely the mood and the atmosphere and the tone of this is just next level. The creep factor is great. I thought it was just truly wonderful. But just be aware that it is translated from Russian, and some people I've heard have had troubles with the writing style or just getting into it and just enjoying it in general. Number 8, I Am Legend. And this is a book by Richard Matheson. I don't know why that didn't want to come to my brain there for a second, but this is, what do you say about I Am Legend? This is one of the most probably famous books out there. It's been made into a movie, I want to say 3 different times. And to be quite honest, I don't think any of the movies actually do that great of a job of nailing it. Maybe the Will Smith one wasn't terrible. Still botched the ending. They all seem to botch the ending. I don't know why they can't figure that part out, but it's just not the ending that you think it's going to be by the story, and I don't think Hollywood wants to accept where Richard Matheson was going with this. Anyway, it is genuinely a good book. I did at one point put this on a list that I made of overrated books, which I actually kind of still stand by that. I think it is a little bit, I just don't think it's as great as everybody seems to say it is, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad book. And it definitely, if you're going to make a list of the top 10 dystopian and post-apocalyptic books out there, I'm sorry, you got to get I Am Legend on there. This is genuinely deserving of being on this list. It is wonderful. It's, post-apocalyptic. The world's ended. There's one man left. He is literally the last man on the face of the planet, as far as we know. And he is surviving in a world of zombie vampire things. It's kind of like they're kind of like a mixture between the two. Just a phenomenal book, to be quite honest. Although maybe not the most entertaining thing that Richard Matheson has written. I think some of his other books are more entertaining than this, but this one I would say is a little bit more thought-provoking, especially once you get to the ending of it and what he did there. Very, very good stuff. Next up at number 7, and I'm going to go with A Canticle for Leibowitz. And this is another one where the world has ended. I want to say it was nuclear apocalypse. Boy, don't quote me on that one. It's been a minute since I read this one. But the world after the apocalypse and the world has ended is now going after books and readers. They're even killing people who can read, just because knowledge is dangerous and books and the knowledge that they contain is dangerous. And this one man goes and he becomes a monk in a monastery, and he uses this monastery to collect as much as he can of knowledge and books and information and kind of store it and hide it away in this monastery. This book's actually a fix-up, which means that it was a series of short stories that they then collected into a book and then released. So the first one is this guy collecting the information, and then we jump forward into the future, and the next story is about somebody finding this monastery and the information that's in it, and then they jump forward into the future again. So it's like 3 different stories kind of collected into one, but they all revolve around this man and the knowledge that he has saved inside of this monastery, and how it affects the time when he does it, how it affects the time in a period jumping forward, and then how we move forward from there. And it's kind of heady. It's kind of about ideas. It's kind of about the ideas of knowledge, and then how this transcends or transitions through time and into the future. I don't know if it's necessarily the most entertaining, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit more introspective, a little bit more thought-provoking, I would say go for Canticle for Leibowitz. Next up at number 6, and we are getting into the first of what I consider to be the big 3 of the dystopian post-apocalyptic novels, and that is Fahrenheit 451 or 451, however you say that, by Ray Bradbury. And I've said this multiple times on the channel, of the big 3 being 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit, I think that Ray Bradbury is actually the best writer out of all 3 of those authors, and I think this is the worst of the big 3, worst, let's put that in quotes, of the big 3 dystopian novels. It is written so beautifully. His prose is just so above and beyond what most authors are capable of writing, or maybe not capable of, but of what authors do write. Just fabulous. But this story, I think, actually, once it gets to the end, and I won't spoil the book here, I found it goes from this post-apocalyptic novel that is set up in the way that it's set up, and it goes up to a point where there's like a chase scene, and everything from the chase scene and on, it took my suspension of disbelief and it just broke it. I couldn't believe where it went. I didn't think the ending was believable. That's not how it would have ended in my mind. That's not how it should have ended in my mind. It has a very, for as bleak of a future that we're living in, it has a very hopeful ending. And I think that hopeful ending was not where the book would have naturally gone. It kind of took me out of the story, I guess is what I'm saying. But either way, the writing prowess of Ray Bradbury cannot be denied. And of course, just the impact of what he's saying and the book burnings and the destruction of knowledge that is happening here. Actually, that is a trend in a lot of literature and a lot of post-apocalyptics, is the destruction of books and knowledge, and the fear of people finding those books and knowledge, which you would be forgiven for being like, man, there's a lot of movies and books that really want to harp on about like the destruction of books and knowledge and stuff. But then again, if you think about it, the amount of times that this has happened in real life, just mass book burnings to hide knowledge from people, book bannings alone, just this is a real and legitimate thing that happens, and it is a very real and legitimate fear that people have. And it is quite important to make sure it is stamped down, not only in real life, but also in fiction, so people don't forget the real life atrocities that happen in this world. And a reminder for us not to go back. Anyway, moving on to number 5, which is Brave New World, next up in that big 3 conversation that I was just having. And this one is by Aldous Huxley, and this is more like the post-apocalyptic dystopian future by way of utopia. So this is more, like I said, less dystopian, more utopian. Now, people aren't actually, this is not a bad future. Oh no, everybody's super happy in this one. Everybody has everything that they could really want or need. They live in excess, and the excess of like sex and everything else. And everybody's super happy because they're drugged into being happy. They all take this medicine and it just makes them euphoric. And you know, and it will evolve from there, and you know, we learn more, and it will evolve and devolve a little bit as the story goes on. It's wonderful. It's a great book. As a matter of fact, speaking of like the big 3 with the other books, Aldous Huxley wrote a letter to George Orwell once and said, you know what, my novel is actually more realistic than your novel, because in the future, I think people will be controlled through drugs and not through manipulation of knowledge and information. And it's kind of funny that he wrote that book to George Orwell, because I'd say they're both right. We currently kind of control the flow of information, and we're all drugged into being happy. So it's like, you know, neither was more right than the other, I don't think. But anyway, Brave New World is absolutely wonderful. There is a very good reason why these 3 books are held up in such high esteem, and it's just they are absolutely mandatory reading for somebody that is interested in this genre, I believe. Even though if you don't think that they are like the best of the best, notice none of them took number 1 on my spot, although we haven't got to 1984 yet. You don't know what spot that's going to come in. But I kind of just ruined that, didn't I? Anyway, no, but there is a reason why they are held so highly, and I think that it's hard to make a top 10 list and leave any one of those off, because they all 100% deserve to be here. They are so iconic for a reason. And they actually all 3 take very different routes to getting to the discoveries and the conclusions that they come to, and all 3 of those are extremely important avenues of thought. Anyway, getting away from that and getting into number 4 on my list is Roadside Picnic. This is one that I actually just recently read this year, and holy crap, am I glad that I did. This is another Russian novel that was translated into English, and this is the Strugatsky brothers, if that's how you say that. Anyway, in the future, there are 6 sites on the face of the planet where aliens have landed and then touched off and then left. Or are they still there? We're not entirely sure. But what we are sure of is where the spacecraft landed created this zone around it where people can't go inside. If you go in, it is extremely dangerous inside the zone. Strange things happen in there. There are strange anomalies. There are these pockets of gravitational pull where the gravity is much stronger. There's strange things happen inside the zone. You go in and you probably don't come back out. There's strange remnants of like this jelly that'll literally melt the insides of your body if you touch it. It's wild what happens in the zone. Then there are these guys named stalkers who go in and out of the zone. They bring out artifacts. They sell them on the black market, essentially, because going into the zone is technically illegal. If you're caught going in and out, you will be put in prison. So we then follow a stalker who goes in and out of the zone, and it's just, it is so fabulously wonderful. These books are great. And then it's also this strange allegory for the Soviet Union, because of course it was written back in the days when the Soviet Union was a thing, and communism and all of that. But then there's also themes of capitalism mixed into it. You could read it as a straightforward science fiction story and a straightforward post-apocalyptic story, which is actually kind of how I prefer to go into these types of things, is just kind of looking at it from that perspective. But there is a wealth of text and subtext that you could get into in this book, which I'm not even going to pretend to have a good grasp on here. But it is just, the story alone is wonderful, fascinating, and just riveting. Just when you get to the final scene in this and how it ends, brilliant book. I absolutely loved everything about it. Next up in number 3 on this list is going to be 1984 by George Orwell. This one is just my favorite of those 3 novels that I keep talking about in this video. And it is, I think, the best, at least for me. It is my favorite. I enjoy it more than the other ones. I enjoy just the dark, bleak, depressing tone of it. Like I said, I just like some dark, drab shit. And this one just really hits home for that. The ideas presented here, the characters presented here, the world of 1984, and everything is controlled by the government. Everything is controlled by Big Brother. Information is controlled by Big Brother. So much so to the point where textbooks are changed so that history is changed to reflect the present or the future that Big Brother wants you to believe is there. And it's just, everything is just truly awful. You go against Big Brother, you will end up at the Ministry of Truth, and you don't want to be there, and it's just, everything about it's bleak. When I got to the end of this book, I was genuinely shocked at where he took this and how he ended it, and just how brutally, depressingly bleak this ended. I was like, fuck. The polar opposite of what Fahrenheit 451 is doing, for sure. Next up, number 2, and it is Stephen King, The Stand. You cannot have a top 10 greatest post-apocalyptic dystopian novel list without The Stand, right? I don't think. You don't have to put it as high on your list as I did, but let's be real. This book is amazing. And I have here the complete and uncut edition, which I think is the superior edition. But it is a little bit long and it is a little bit wordy. So if you like the other one better, I don't blame you for a second. But I just love Stephen King. I just love his worlds. I just love what he does. And I love the journey in this book. I love the characters in this book. I love what happens and how we get there. Ending is actually, maybe, in my opinion, not the greatest Stephen King ending. It is kind of weaker than some of his other endings, but that doesn't stop it from getting this high on the list. And of course, if you don't know, this is the super flu breaks out. This particular virus was grown in a lab, manipulated in a lab, and then it accidentally gets out and it spreads through the world. It might be a little bit close to home for, post-2020 world, of course, none of that is proven. Let's not even begin to get into that conversation. But this was just such a good book. And like I said, it's mainly driven by the characters and the stories and the events. And it's just so wonderfully delicious, even with the weak, lackluster ending that I feel that it genuinely does have. It's just such a massive tour de force in storytelling. It's not surprising that it has stayed at the forefront of this particular conversation of this kind of story for as long as it has. It's not going away anytime soon. It is genuinely worth reading. I mean, I know a lot of people that would put this as the greatest novel ever written, like full stop. I don't know, I wouldn't go that far, but God, is it good. Now, number 1, greatest post-apocalyptic novel of all time, and I cannot even begin to imagine giving this to anything other than The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This book just about broke me. I made it, I forget. I had it in my review that I did of it where I think I made it to page 18 or 19 before I literally was just broken down in tears over it, and it didn't stop till the book was over. Like, I don't think I've cried more at any book that I've ever, and I'm not like a super big crier. It takes a lot to make me cry when I'm reading a book, but you know what? The Road did, and like from like page, I don't know, somewhere in the teens all the way to the end of the book, man. It crushed me. Anyway, The Road is this post-apocalyptic novel. The world has ended, there's nothing left, and it's really this man and his son, and they are going to attempt to make it to the coast. And the dad just has this utter belief that if they can just make it to the coast, everything's going to be okay. They'll figure out how to survive. And there's no real reason for him to think this. We don't really have an insane amount of logic as to, it's just like that last gasp of hope. It's either that or curl up in a ball and die. And he can't accept that. So he's going to make this one last trek across the, country, and they're going to go down the road, and they're just going to try not to die. And it is the worst thing of all time. Just attempting to make it through the book without having your soul crushed into dust by Cormac and it's insane. I can't express how difficult of a read this is. It is the most depressing thing you'll ever read in your entire life. And if you are a sucker for post-apocalyptic, there it is. If you're a sucker for like the dystopian, there it is. If you're a sucker for a good dad story, good father and his son just trying to survive, it doesn't get any better. The movie's phenomenal too. Actually, I just recently did a video where I did like the best adaptations, and I somehow completely missed The Road. Don't ask me how. That probably should have been on that list. We'll go ahead and give it a shout out right here. But oh my God. And if you disagree or this doesn't go as high on your list as it does on mine, I guess I can see that. But for me personally, there is nothing that touched me more. There is nothing that has affected me more. And there is nothing that really just ground my soul into dust and just, oh God, The Road. Now I will say really fast before I leave out of here that The Road is written in an extremely strange fashion. The paragraphs are like literal blocks. There's like no punctuation. There is no, it is very strange to read The Road. And I think that might just be Cormac McCarthy's style. It's the only book I've ever read of his. I need to read more just because of how just devastatingly good this book is. But it takes a minute to get used to the writing style of The Road. But once you get into it, it's just one of the greatest reading experiences I have ever had, period. Not just post-apocalyptic. It will get into your soul before that book is over. 100%. Now, everybody, is there something that I missed? Is there a book that I haven't read or isn't on this list that you think should be on the list? Please put it down in the comments below. And as always, everybody, the link for my Patreon is in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.